right, ladies and gentlemen, make sure those seat belts are fastened. Put those trays in a locked and upright position and hold on to those hats. It is about to get exciting here because we are talking scientific research. And just when you thought it couldn't get even better, we're going to actually talk about how to read a scientific research article. And just in case you are a bit confused, I'm talking about primary research that you find in academic journals. Not research that you might find in like a Teen Vogue magazine, although there's nothing wrong with Teen Vogue. I read it myself. I'm going to be honest, when I first started reading scientific research, I was confused and pretty bored until I started noticing a trend that most of the articles are written using the exact same structure. I mean, sure, there are some minor differences, but we're not talking like Simon and Garfunkel versus One Direction differences. There, one has talent, the other not so much. The differences between scientific research articles are more like, One Direction versus The Wanted. Only people who really care, or, fangirls, actually notice the difference. And before I start breaking down the structure, it's important to be aware of just two things. First, it's important to understand why the researchers actually writing the article in the first place. I mean, it's really only for a couple of reasons. I guess first would be the money and fame that you get with being a great scientific researcher. It's like living a real rock star life. But most likely, the article is presented in a way not only for the reader to understand what the researcher did, but to be able to replicate what they did. A research article is actually a blueprint for you to go out there and try the research yourself. Scientists figure that if everyone can replicate their research, and then we all get similar results, then maybe we're onto something. The second thing I want you to keep in the back of your mind is there's always going to be language in the article that caters to the field of the researcher. Psychologists are going to use language from the field of psychology, biologists from the field of biology, and etc. And researchers also tend to use very big words. Maybe because they're nerdy, but really because they don't want to waste your time. You're not going to see a lot of wasted words or some BS in their writing. The goal of a researcher is to say what they have to say in the least amount of words possible. All right, let's get down to it. Most research articles start off with the title and the author. And there's usually more than one author. Sometimes there's like 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 authors that actually contributed to the article. Sometimes the article, it just gives you one author, and then it says after the author's name, it goes like et al. Et al meaning like, all the other authors that contributed but are not important enough to list in the article. Okay, the first real section you're going to see is called the abstract. The abstract is a 1 to 2 paragraph summary of the whole research article. When I was in grad school, my professor used to compare the abstract to like a movie trailer, but I always thought that was kind of misleading because the movie trailer just teases the movie to you. A real abstract is a big ass spoiler giving you everything the research paper is about in just a short paragraph. The abstract is a great time saver because it kind of enables you to read one paragraph to decide whether you actually want to read the rest of the article or not. Below the abstract, you'll find the introduction, which is often called the literature review. This introduces the reader to the subject being researched. It will usually explain the rationale behind the research, often by citing other studies that were already completed dealing with the material of the research. And the researcher will often point out gaps in past research and then talk about how their own research is a real attempt to try to fill those gaps. Often at the end of the literature review, the researcher will hint at their hypothesis and their null hypothesis. After the literature review, the next section is the method section. The method section usually provides information on how the researcher went about doing the study. It's often broken down into like 4 or 5 subsections, but sometimes the researcher just sticks everything under the one title method section. If they're going to break down the method section, they usually start off with something called the design. In this subsection, they're going to talk about the specific structures of the study. For example, was it an independent measures design where they study different groups at the same time, or was it a repeated measures design where they study the same group over a period of time? In the design section, they may also, lay out the independent variable, and they may talk about some ethical issues in their design process. The next subsection in the method section, I guess, would be the participant section. Here, the researcher is going to talk about the population they chose to sample, how they got the sample, was it a random sample, an opportunity sample, the demographics of the sample, and once again, they're probably going to talk about how the sample was ethical or ethical issues behind their sample. Next in the method section, there's the materials section, and this is where the researcher will just list the materials they use in the study, everything from, paper to pencils to actually specific instruments that they needed to complete the study. Finally, in the method section, you'll find the procedure of the experiment. The procedure is a step-by-step instructional guide of what the researcher did to conduct the study. It really is broken down step by step. Remember, the researcher is only listing all this because he wants you, the reader, to perhaps replicate the experiment in the future. So if the procedure section is not detailed, you won't be able to replicate the experiment in the first place. Okay. All right, after the method section, you're going to have what we call the results section. Here, the researcher is going to present the results both in probably narrative and graphic form. Many researchers will break down the results section into two subsections itself. The first section being descriptive statistics, and the next section being inferential statistics. Descriptive statistics kind of describes where your data is, where the center of your data is. It could use simple things like the mean, median, and mode. It could talk about standard deviation. It could talk about range. They're just really trying to describe what the results look like. Oftentimes, this is where the researcher will include a bar graph or some kind of a chart that really graphically describes where the data is. Next, in the results section, the researcher will talk about the inferential results of their data. These statistics were designed to figure out whether there was actually any meaning behind your results. Were the results likely to chance, or was it an actual difference? Can you generalize your results to a larger population? The type of tests they may use here are things like the chi-squared test, the Man-Windu test, the Wilcoxon-Signed-Ranks tests. Things most people, unless you're taking a stats class, just really don't have to know. The section after the results section is called the discussion section, and this is the real meat of your research paper. Here the researcher is going to spend some time talking about what the results actually mean. They're going to talk about what they've learned. They're going to evaluate whether the actual research supports the hypothesis or the null hypothesis. It's important to understand they probably are not going to repeat the results. They're just going to talk about the results in more detail and how the results actually affect the field in general. They might talk about also the limitations in their study, although I wouldn't spend too much time there. And they're probably going to, talk about future questions or what they would do next or what they would do differently or what they think the next piece of research should be dealing with this topic. After the discussion section, you're going to have the references, which is just everything cited, mostly things from the literature review. And then finally, you're going to have the appendix. And the appendix is going to be actually, hopefully, attachments to all the materials and things used in the research study. All right, so there you have it. Those are the basic sections you're going to find in a scientific research article and what they mean. Just remember, when you first start reading them, they're going to seem complicated and convoluted, but after a while, you'll get used to reading them. All right, I really got to make my next video more exciting than this one.